Hey, what's up, mediums? Welcome to another episode of Live here on Keystroke Medium. I'm Josh Hayes here with my co-host Scott Moon, and today we're talking with best-selling author Marc Alan Edelheit. Marc is the author of Stiger's Tigers, a fantasy military saga featuring the Roman Legion and I believe dragons. But correct me if I'm wrong. Marc, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And I hope I didn't misspoke that. I looked at a couple of the covers. I haven't actually read the book yet, but I looked at a couple of the covers.
The humanity.
Like they had, right, or listened to it, as the case may be. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and then a little bit about how you got into writing?
Well, I started out as an educator. I used to be a middle school teacher. I taught first, second, third grade, fifth through eighth. Eventually became a middle school principal. Love that. Now I'm working in the healthcare industry and got into writing as a hobby. Still a hobby now because it's not my full-time job. I love doing it. It's great to come home from work and have a really stressful day and then, play with my kids and then transition into writing and get lost in a completely different world. It's a lot of fun. Yeah. And I've been writing for a while. I used to hate reading and writing when I was a kid, and then I grew to like it. The whole backstory there. But, I've always been tinkering around at writing. And one day we were driving to the shore, my family and I, and everybody but me was asleep. I was driving, they were sleeping. And in the car, it was a 2-hour drive to the Jersey Shore. And I said, you know what, I'm doing history podcasts right now. It's about the same amount of effort that would go into writing a book. Why don't I just write a book? And I'd been tinkering around with a few and decided that what I was going to do was basically come up with a new concept, something fresh, something easy. I planned it out, wrote it in 3 weeks and took a year to edit it and published it. It turned out to be Stiger's Tigers, and found out I did not know what I was doing, and I just struck lightning. So it's been a heck of a ride ever since I've published it. And my passion is actually hardcore military science fiction, and here I am writing hardcore military fantasy, which is really fun, a lot of work, and I've gotten a great response from my fans. So can't complain.
When was Tigers first published?
End of March 2015. So, it was kind of funny because when it came out, I've been telling my wife for a while, I could be a good writer. And she's like, yeah. Why don't you just get done with it, So when I finally published it, it took off and I started getting reviews, and I had some bloggers read it and review it. And suddenly we're selling thousands of copies, and it's the real deal. And people are calling me at work wanting to talk to me about my book and my series, and or sending me pictures dressed up as some of the characters, which was kind of interesting. And it's really cool that people get invested in it. Next thing you know, I'm getting barraged by agents emailing me saying, hey, we want to represent you. We'll sell your book. And this one guy basically went ahead and emailed me and said, listen, if you pay me $1,500, I'll sell your book. And I was like, screw you. So I emailed some of the top agencies out there, and almost immediately hit it off with Andrea Hurst at Hurst and Associates. And she looked at my work, we talked, we had multiple conversations. I felt very comfortable with her, and then I committed to sign. And the day I got the contract, one of the other top agencies that I had written to wrote me back and said, I'm sorry, but we're not interested. Your work doesn't meet our criteria. And I was like, well, I said, you know what? They wrote me back. I'm going to write them and say, thank you very much for responding. I've committed to sign with the Hurst and Associates. And they like literally within like 5 minutes wrote me back and said, have you signed the contract yet? And I was like, you know what? I've got the right agent here. I'm going to go with Andrea. And,
right.
She's taught me a lot. She's taught me, what I was doing was wrong. Some of the things I was doing was right, but there was a lot that I was doing wrong. And I've really learned a lot. So getting a good agent, I think, is critical to future success. And she's helped grow that from a few thousand sales to well over 150,000 sales in a single year. So it's been
Well,
pretty good.
yeah, that's
pretty
very
impressive. I know when you said you first started off, you said the agent wanted to charge you $1,500 to represent you.
Yeah.
I mean, as for what I've been told by other people, is that's a big red flag. Is if they want to charge you money, they should be, most of the time, it seems like they should earn their money by their percentage.
Exactly. And anybody that wants to charge you don't want to deal with.
Right.
They should want to represent you. And really, I've spoken with a lot of authors since I've gotten into this. I was just at Dragon Con, and I was on a panel with John Ringo and SM Sterling and a bunch of other people that were really fantastic. Bill Fawcett. It was kind of wild because I read their work growing up, some of them.
Yeah.
And we were talking about agents, and the common theme is you've got to have an agent that's really on your side, that's there for you,
Right.
and that really wants to support you and help you grow. If they're there for themselves, it's a no-no. You're just not gonna you're not gonna get anything good out of that relationship, and you're gonna end up getting screwed.
Right.
Well, I want to talk about the agents a little bit more later on in the podcast. I want to touch real briefly about how Stiger's came about. I mean, you said you decided, hey, I'm gonna write a book, and you said you're kind of a hardcore military science fiction writer, and said I'll do something different. Can you tell us how that idea kind of germinated and evolved into that first book, and then why you decided to go with indie publishing instead of traditional publishing for it?
Well, first I went with indie publishing because I didn't have a publisher. And I said to myself, when I went to go publish it, do I want to go through finding an agent, or do I kind of want to do this myself? My mother is actually a published author, and she does it all herself. So I said, you know what, I'm going to give it a shot myself, see what happens. I'm a big believer that if you don't try something, you'll never achieve something. I've done all kinds. I've been lucky. I've traveled the world. I've done all kinds of things. I've done technical wreck diving, mountain climbing, ice climbing, you name it. I'm that kind of person. Whitewater kayaking. I've almost killed myself a few times and checked out on Darwin's List. But
Wow.
but I'm a believer that if you don't try it, you'll never succeed. So I decided I'd go the indie publishing route, and I'm actually working on a project right now that we're in the process of selling to a publisher, and that's going to be an interesting experience because that's new for me. But when it came to Stiger's Tigers, I was, as I said, I was on my way to the shore. It was a 2-hour drive, and I'm a big podcaster. I have a history podcast, which I've actually not done any episodes on in 2 years because I've been busy writing. But I love listening to podcasts. I love history. I will devour history books like there's no tomorrow. And I said, you know what? Why don't I try to do something that's fairly simple, something that is different than what I'm used to writing, which was science fiction, because I've got several science fiction books I've written, but I'm not ready to publish them since I've got into this line of work. I've learned a lot, and they need a lot of work. One day they will get published. But so I sat down and I said, you know what? Why don't I write a fantasy book? I like fantasy series. I've read David Eddings, Dave Duncan's, Brandon Sanderson. I mean, you name it. I've got literally thousands of books that are sitting in the basement right now in storage boxes, and that are, when I was a teen and in my 20s, I read. And I said, I'm going to write a fantasy book, but I want to do something that's different than what has been done before. I want to make it realistic, because one of the things that I hate in reading is when you read about a battle in a fantasy book, 9 times out of 10 it's not realistic. It's this imagined battle. And I wanted to look at, well, how did battles go down? And what's a really fascinating period, and what really hasn't been done before? And it occurred to me that, some people have dabbled in this area where you've taken the equivalent of Roman legionaries and dropped them in a fantasy setting, but nobody's really done it right. And I mean, right is my opinion, may not be somebody else's opinion. So I went ahead and basically said, okay, well, if I'm going to write this, I want to go ahead and do it as accurately as possible. not only do I want to show the battles as accurate, which is a whole level of difficulty in itself, but I want to show how the Roman legionaries thought, how they lived, how they ate. Clearly, they're not going to be Roman legionaries because it's a fantasy setting, but I wanted to make it as interesting as possible, because if you don't, as a reader, come away learning something from a book, the author's not doing a good job. So, and if it's believable, people are gonna, they're gonna, that suspension of willing disbelief, they're gonna buy into it. And so I wanted to include those facets as well. Another thing I wanted to do with Tigers was drop the people, my readers, in the middle of the story with as little information as possible, because I didn't want to create a massive data dump that, you read that where it's like 6 or 7 pages. Oh, this is the history of the world and stuff like that. This is what they did years before. The story opens in the middle of the story. And, and I drip feed information about, what happened in the past, what's going on now. And I also take the Disney theory where, you kill off the family, the mother and father, the authority figures, and suddenly the character's on their own and you've got a ton of freedom. So, I mean, there's a lot of different techniques that I took.
Well, I think that though that even obviously you've done your research and knew, this is what I want because this is what I like. I think, so a lot of new authors they sit down to write a story and they say, I can't tell the story or people won't understand it unless they know everything about my world up front. And so they do that data dump or that info dump and they say, these wars lasted for 5,000 years and this person is this person. And reading for me is figuring out, is learning about the world and learning about the characters and not just having, it's the mystery. Yeah. So it's very cool that in your first book, you realized that and went, yeah, let's do that.
Well, see, in taking that tact, what it also does is it gives me tremendous freedom to throw in twists and turns. At the end of book 1, there's a big twist. At the end of book 2, there's a big twist. At the end of book 3, there's a huge twist. And I've had people leave on the reviews, what kind of a sadist ends the book like this? Which is telling me that I'm doing my job. And in a way, you also throw the twist in at the end because you want them to keep reading and be invested in it. And that doesn't mean that you have to write 5,000 pages and nothing happens. There are a number of authors that I could name that you read and it literally takes 20 pages for them to eat breakfast. A lot happens in my books very quickly. But it's that historical mindset and going back to that in a way. And then we can talk about some of the battles because that's really interesting in itself. But when you look at the historical mindset, one of the things that I wanted to do was make sure that my characters were not politically correct. That was super important to me, that if I'm going to put them in the story, because you read a lot of fantasy books or science fiction books, and the hero has to do everything right.
When you say politically correct, are you talking politically correct to like our times or to your story?
Politically correct to our times.
Right.
So, in my book, the legionaries, the hero, the characters, they come from that ancient mindset where, what was considered acceptable back then, today would be considered war crimes. So, I've had people email me saying, look, I really love your books, but I'm having trouble identifying with Stiger's empire and them being identified as the good guys. Well, who's to say they are the good guys?
Have you read a lot of Bernard Cornwell?
I have.
Yeah,
I love his work.
He's got a couple of books where you're reading along, and you're like, oh my God, but that's the thing is it's true to the period, not to our period, and so it's has more resonance and more believability, I think.
Correct. And he is a fantastic author. If I could write with half the skill he has, it would be really fantastic. But when you look at that, when you're looking at that historical time period, you have to throw yourself into it and really do your homework, because if you don't do your homework, you're going to miss something. And some of your more hardcore fans who are familiar with the thought processes of that period will call you on it. And that's why, as an author, if you're going to do something like that, like Bernard does or I do, you want to make sure it's as accurate as possible. When you look at like some of the battles and stuff like that, in today, there's really no, we have no concept of what those battles actually were like, because you have historians that actually will write about those battles, but they don't tell you what it was like to be a common soldier on the front line. They tell you about the tactics. They tell you about, you know, hey, this is what the general did. This is what the enemy did. This is what happened. But they're not talking about what it was like to be there, you know, in the trenches, on the lines, performing serial killer stuff, you know, for hours at a time sometimes. And the reason for that is because the ancient writers knew their audience, and their audience were familiar with those kind of things.
Right.
So they didn't feel a need to retell the gory details. Every once in a while you hear like the river ran red or the ground ran red. But when you look at those battles and how they went down, you know, some of the ancient Roman battles against, you know, Hannibal, Carthage, whatever, you know, even the Spartans at Thermopylae, it's hard for us to actually have a realistic idea of what actually occurred, because nobody has seen that for so long. Right. And what you've got to do is you've got to do your homework and really do your best imagining as to what that was like. And when you look at an ancient battlefield, you know, modern battlefields today, rifle, bayonet, not as much blood as ancient battlefields. So,
except for, you know, World War I, I was reading about that a while back, and it's hard to conceive the amount of carnage, you know, charging those machines when they, at the time when technology changed and people realized, oh, these weapons are more deadly than we thought, but we're going to keep using the old tactics, and then they just die by like 1,000, you know.
Yeah, but what you got to, you know, that's horrific stuff, okay? But imagine getting down on a Roman legionary level and being expected to carve somebody up, not just once or twice, but repeatedly, or potentially be carved up yourself. And, you know, when you get shot, there's the potential to lose a lot of blood, but many times you don't lose as many blood as if you were carved up. And so, you know, what you've got to consider is that many of these, the Roman legionaries, the people that fought, you know, where you've got two lines that are pressing against each other, pushing, that by the end of the battle, they're just covered in blood and gore. I mean, literally covered in it. And, you know, when they say that the ground ran red, it very well could have. I mean, you look at, I mean, how many quarts of blood could you potentially lose if you cut somebody open? You know, I mean, what, 2?
Yeah, if you cut, you know, 10,000 people up in a you know, close quarters battle, that's a lot of blood.
Yeah, size of a football field. A lot of bodies too.
It's like George R. R. Martin takes a lot of flack for how harsh his worlds are and stuff like that. But I think I imagine that he reads a lot of historical fiction or history and stuff too, because, you know, life was cheap, you know, in ancient times.
It was.
You could be killed for calling somebody a name or stealing a chicken, you know.
Human rights was not
chicken wrestling.
Yeah, for wrestling a chicken, you have to die.
Chicken wrestling.
I don't know how we got to there from that, but yeah, I'm a huge fan of that genre. So I just recently got your first book, Stiger's Tigers, and I'm very much looking forward to that. So how do you structure? I mean, how do you plot out a battle and then write about like Stiger's Tigers, or how does that happen?
Well, what I do is before I actually started writing Stiger's Tigers, I planned out the whole series. I sat down and I've got where I'm going, what I'm going to do, how I'm going to get there. And then when I actually go to write each book, I sit down and write a detailed outline before I actually start writing. It's chapter by chapter by chapter. And it's, you know, these are the characters in each scene, time of day, weather, that kind of stuff. You know, and it's very basic. He does this, he does that, he does this. These are the plot lines in there. So it gives me a outline from where I need to go. I run into a lot of people that say they suffer from writer's block, but I really don't. And the reason I don't is because I've got a plan before I actually sit down and write. And when I actually do sit down and start writing, I can write a book once I've got that plan in 3 to 4 weeks. then it takes like a year to edit or 6 months
Right.
to edit. I mean,
And then how long does it take to write the outlines?
It takes me about a month and a half to write the outlines. But the reality is that months before I get to that point of actually sitting down and writing the outline, I've got these journal books that I'm constantly thinking of the story and I'm writing ideas down. And so then I take those ideas, incorporate it into the outline. And I always make sure that wherever I am, I've got a journal or something to write with, because you could be in the shower and wrestling with an idea or having an idea that you've already come up with, and then suddenly realizing, whoa, why don't I change it to this? This is much cooler.
It sounds like Josh. I know Josh keeps a bunch of journals and stuff like that.
Yeah, I've got out of that. My problem is they're not organized, so I've got like 5 of them that have ideas for all this stuff. Like, I know I had a great idea, but I don't know where it is now.
Yeah, and that's, I can't tell you how many great ideas I've had that I've lost. So it's now become habit. And the other thing is that if you don't work at writing each day, and it could be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever, and you don't get into that routine of doing something, working on your book each day, you'll never get it done. And my trick in writing is that, and I've told people this repeatedly that I run into that are trying to write a book, is that you've got to start from the beginning when you write it, and not edit, and basically write from the beginning to the end. And only when you have a complete product do you go and edit. Because when you're writing it, you're thinking, this is great, this is art, this is fantastic. And then you read it and you're like, oh my gosh, what crap did I just write here? What was I thinking? And really the editing process is the worst process. Because you've got to worry at it and you've got to change it. And eventually you start working at it to the point where you've spent so much time on it that it ends up becoming smooth and it becomes art. And then again, there are other parts of the book that you'll finish and you won't be satisfied with, but you know what? You'll never be satisfied with it. It's time to move on, because it's almost like great books aren't finished. They're only passed along.
Yeah.
And I've talked to a few other authors that have the same feeling. It's like, well, I really like this part of the book, but I was never satisfied with this. And I've had parts that I don't like in the book that my fans tell me that's their favorite part in the book. And I still don't think is right, but there's a point when you have to move on, because it'll drive you nuts.
Yeah. When you sit down and you say you plan it out for a month and a half, and then you write it in 3 or 4 weeks, the first draft, how many words do you usually try to tackle after you get home and a night? What do you sit down?
I don't set a limit.
Okay.
In the beginning, it's tough because I enjoy playing video games. World of Tanks, World of Warships. Now I'm playing Civil War Ultimate General, and it's a good game. And I've just finished an outline, and I'm about to actually start writing. And the game's called to me, and it's like procrastinating, and it's like, I've really got to work. And the football game was on last night. I was actually working during the football game. My wife looked at me.
Go Chiefs!
Go Chiefs! My wife was looking at me like, you waited all weekend and now you're going to work while the Chiefs are on. And I'm like, yeah, well, I got a beer, I got a fire, I got the game, and the kids are asleep.
Life is good.
Yeah. So, but really, I don't set myself limits. I set myself goals as into, I want to write like a chapter a day or a chapter a half a day. And then, 10 days from now, I want to be at this point here. And I'll never hit that point, but it's a good goal to have. But I'm pretty damn close.
Yeah.
So I don't set myself a limited words. I think because there are days that you're going to come home from work and you're not going to be in a particularly good mood. You'll be tired, exhausted. And usually if you get frustrated, it's going to come out in your writing. Now, being frustrated is really good if you have a scene that you don't want to write that, is going to be pretty ugly and pretty brutal. And I've had those, and they've come up fantastic. But it's you've just got to pace yourself and stay at it. And there are days where I'll work, like I'll come home from work, play with my kids, have dinner, put them to bed, and then be up till 2 in the morning, from like 9 to 2 in the morning writing. and just have a
lose track of
fantastic.
time and lose track of time and just go to work on it. That's fun.
Exactly. And then, you know, the thing is that sometimes when you really got into it, it's hard to stop. And then you got to realize, I got to be up at 7 tomorrow to go to work, and I've got to go ahead and go to sleep now. And you can't, because your mind's going and coming down and putting on TV and then falling asleep on the couch. And my wife waking me up in the morning going, "Hey, go upstairs, get a shower."
Yeah.
So, but it's,
well, I want to transition kind of into a different area of the writing, and that comes finishing a product is one thing, getting it out there and getting people to read it is another, and also getting people to give you good feedback is something that a lot of authors, I think, struggle. We talked the other day, and you mentioned you had 20 some odd beta readers.
Yeah,
a pretty cool big group of core readers. How did you manage to collect those readers and get them to give you feedback to make your book better?
Well, on my first book, I didn't have any beta readers. It was just me. And nobody actually read my book, my first book, until the editor that I hired to perform a developmental edit. After my first book came out and it took off, I spoke with a number of authors that were represented by my agent and that she had introduced me to. And virtually all of them had beta readers. And one of them went ahead and suggested, well, you know, do you have a newsletter list? And I said, well, yeah, I do. I put it together. I read online that you want to, build your brand. And as you build your brand, have a way to communicate directly to your readers. Same thing with a Facebook page. So I had these fans that were emailing me that clearly loved the work, that has signed up for the newsletter, had signed up to my Facebook page to like my Facebook page. And I ran a contest. And I went ahead and I said, you know what, I'm going to accept, I don't know, I think it was like 10 beta readers for book 2. And I had, a few thousand people make submissions, and out of those, and I had them write why they want to be it. And I picked what I thought was going to be the best ones out of there. I also had a random drawing for a few extras on that one. And I brought them together. And the common thing that I've learned from other authors is that you don't choose beta readers from people that you actually know.
Yeah.
You choose them from people you don't know, so you get unfiltered feedback that's good feedback.
Right.
And some of the beta readers you get will just go ahead and give you what they think you want to hear. Other beta readers will give you feedback as to what you don't want to hear, which is really what you want to hear.
Right.
Anytime that you get feedback on a book you've worked on for a year, it's good feedback, but it's hard to hear.
Yeah.
You and I were talking yesterday about one of my beta readers came to me and said, well, did you ever play football? And it's like, well, yes, I did. Do you know what's missing from this book? The smell of leather. And I'm like, what do you mean the smell of leather? Have you ever had old football pads? What do they smell like? And then it hit me, and it was like, oh, you're so right.
Yeah.
So you get things like that. In my last book, Stiger, which just published, and it's pretty excited about it. One of my beta readers came back and said, I really don't like the motivation for this one character. And I looked at it, and I thought the motivation was good. Mm-hmm. And then I said, you know what, he might be right. So I started working on it. And then another beta reader came back a couple days later and said, you know what, the motivation on this character is not good. You need to fix it. And I'd already started working on it. And I talked to my editors about it. And now I've got 2 editors and my agents, and they go ahead and give me their feedback on the books and the works and stuff like that. And right now, I think that because of that process, the motivation on the character is spot on, and it makes the book a better book. So the beta readers have something to offer, which is they get the first look at your work, and you've been working at it so long that in a way you can be blinded to certain things. You could see it in your head a certain way.
Right.
You may think it comes off that way, but it really doesn't. And I've had beta readers go ahead and say, why is the character doing this? Why is he hunting for so-and-so and going to assassinate him or whatever? And I look at it and I'm like, well, that's not what I intended. That maybe you should go read that again. That was one of my initial comments to one of my beta readers. And then it hit me, well, if it's not clear to him,
right,
it's going to not be clear to other people. So then I went back and clarified. So they have a integral role in, the process that I think you can't undervalue. And, I've gone from 10 to now 20, and probably for the next book, I'll probably have like 25 to 30 people. Because as some people that were beta readers for the last book can't do it for this book because of health reasons, whatever. And it's always good to get fresh views.
I got a quick question about your beta readers. So how many of your beta readers, if you know this, are writers versus just straight readers? And does it matter?
I don't know. I don't know. And I don't think it matters. I think that what matters is that they're fans of the series and they're invested in the series and they want to see it. They want to, be part of that developmental process and see it grow and see it be successful. And I think that's what really matters. And honestly, I'm super grateful for any feedback I get.
Sure.
Like my editor, Hannah, she's my developmental editor. She's absolutely fantastic. But let me tell you, when I get that first draft back from her, and it's got like 30,000 comments on it, and some of this stuff is not easy to hear. And it's like, well, you could do this, or you could do this better, or again, please,
right.
For the
love of God.
Yeah, like with my copy editor, Audrey, I've got it's becoming a running joke now. The word farther as opposed to further. I can never seem to get it right, and she, it's like a
tricky word.
When I sent this last book to her, either way is right, but when you're relating the distance, but it just sounds better with farther. I thought I had gotten all of my furthers out of there, and I hadn't, and she caught it. But out of 70,000 words or 120,000 words, it's.
Do you have words that you just quit using because they're so annoying?
Yes.
Me too.
And I'm not going to admit.
It's not even worth writing that word. I can never get it right. We're gonna rephrase that.
At what point do you send it out to your beta readers? I mean, obviously you're doing it before you send to your editors, but you write your first draft and you go through it and edit it for 6 months to a year, like you said. Do you send it out to beta readers during that editing process or after?
After it goes through the developmental edit.
Okay.
Basically, when I get it to the developmental stage, what happens is my developmental editor takes 3 weeks to a month to work on it, give me their feedback. I'll look at what they've said. They're really the first sounding board, and they're usually the ones that are going to have the most impact upon the book. And then I'll go through their suggested changes, and there are a lot of them that I will not agree with, whether it's military, how they operated. I remember one comment came back, well, the men were blown. They didn't like that, but militarily speaking, they're exhausted, and
right.
I like that term, so I kept it.
It's a phrase they use in that term. Yeah, you got to take it in context. All those
exactly. So after it goes through that developmental process, then I'll share it with my agents. I've got 2 wonderful agents, Andrea Hurst and Sean Fletcher. They're absolutely fantastic, and they're going to go ahead and give me a lot of feedback. And that's unfiltered stuff, and that's really what you want. It's
right.
And they're going to tell you what they like, what they don't like, and their motivation is getting to me to be as successful as possible. And because if I'm successful, they're going to be successful, and that's their motivation. And you got to appreciate it. And somebody who's going to work that hard and perform a completely additional edit on the book after it's already gone through development, it's just, that's the kind of agent you want. Right. And around that same time, it goes to the beta readers. And the beta readers, I ask them to look at certain things. I'll usually send an email that's like the Magna Carta, that'll lay out what I want them to look at, including, hey, if you find any spelling mistakes, let me know. Because it's not uncommon to go through the copy edit and still have, 3 or 4 errors. When you have a 100,000 word book, 1 or 2 errors is pretty good odds. Right. But you're going to get reviewers that are still going to hang you on it because they found, they found the word
edited because there was 1 word out of place. Yeah,
exactly. And what I do is the beta readers will get access to like 3 or 4 different drafts of the book. They'll get the first one from the developmental edit, after the agents, after all of their feedback's in, they'll get a second one, then I'll work on it some more, and then they'll get the third and final one that's for publication. And it's kind of interesting because if you've got really good beta readers, which I do, and I love them.
Yeah, sounds like
they'll read your book over and over and over again. I had one tell me he read it 8 times. It was that good.
Wow.
And I'm like, I have trouble reading it once. I've worked on it for 6 months and I hate it now.
Right.
But when you get to the publication stage, you're done with it. You're just like you're so over it. It's your baby, but you've put so much time, effort, and energy into it, and you've read it literally 6 or 7 times before it goes off to get published that your eyes hurt, and you're just ready to say goodbye to it. You don't want to you want to work on something else, and usually then it's like a 2-week vacation where you're thinking about your next book. You've already got the outline in place, and then you begin planning and you work your way into it, which is where I am now. I'm about to go full bore to the next book, but it's actually it's a lot of work. It's more work than I ever thought.
I'm not sure you can explain to somebody who's never written a book what it's like to read your own book and the emotional roller coaster that can be, because you'll be like, this is the best thing. I can't believe I'm so brilliant, to like, I'm just going to quit writing. I can't believe I ever even started this. I can't believe somebody's reading this stuff.
It's true. It's true. And the worst roller coaster is after you've been published and you've got another book out, it's like, will they like it?
Oh yeah.
That's even worse.
Yeah.
I was on a panel with this is a funny story. I was on a panel with John Ringo at DragonCon this year, which is a great
one of my favorite authors, by the way. Just
he's awesome. He's a great guy. We were sitting next to each other on this panel, and when my wife and I we went there, we went to all the venues I'd be speaking at, and the first one we went to, there was a panel going on, and there was like 4 people on the panel, and there's like 6 or 7 people in the room that could fit like a couple hundred. And I was like, oh, this isn't that bad. It's not going to be that bad. So then I get there, a few hours later, and I sit down, and people come in the room, all the seats start getting filled up, and it's like standing room only, and then it's like I have to cut it off, and it's like, and then John comes in late, and he sits down next to me, and there's like 6 people on this panel. And we start talking, and somehow I mentioned Amazon reviews, and he just looked at me and said, "You've got to stop reading those."
Yeah.
And I was like, "No, you don't understand. I want to, because sometimes you find some really good stuff in there.
Sure.
If somebody's going to take the time to write a review, I want to read it." And you can actually tell the people who don't read your book, who give it like a page and then write a nasty review, and that's fine. I mean, hey, they bought it. And it's like, thank you. But John was actually a really interesting guy. We were on 2 panels together, and on the middle of this one panel, he turned to me, and because I guess he didn't want to hear what one of the other panelists was saying, and he started talking to me about, do you read for pleasure? And I'm like, well, I used to. And he's like, I used to as well. And we didn't realize our mics were open. So everybody in the audience was hearing what we were saying. And it's like, when I read, I'm only reading my stuff now, and I'm reading research materials. And I'm like, I'm the same way. And it's funny that you stop, when you become an author, you stop reading for pleasure, because you're basically working all the time. And when you do read for pleasure, it's usually one of your favorite authors.
And you filter everything through it, and you can get frustrated, or you read. It's hard to stop reading as a writer, because you're reading for craft, and you're reading for this, and it's a different process.
Yes. When I'm editing my own book, it's like I'm looking at each and every line. And my wife sometimes will sit there and say, "Why does it take so long for you to read a chapter?" What are you talking about? And because I can literally, when I was a teacher in the summer, I used to read like 4 or 5 books a week when I had nothing going on. I used to love that. I used to live in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, right on the ocean. I would go kayaking. I would take a book with me, go out to an island, have a sandwich, and just read on this island with like seagulls and
awesome,
wildlife around me. It was fun. Or I'd climb a mountain like Cardigan Mountain in New Hampshire and just go up there and sit on the bald top of the mountain and read a book for a few hours. You're exhausted by the time you get up there.
Yeah.
but now it's like I'm looking at every line and how it works and looking for inconsistencies. And, you know, when I do actually read a book for pleasure nowadays, and there are a few guilty pleasures of mine, like Rick Brown with the Aurora series. That's a fantastic series. I love that.
R.Y.K. Brown, right?
Yeah, Rick Brown. Yeah, good author, really good author. Another one that I'm reading right now is Christopher Nuttall, the Empire's Core, which is a good one as well. I don't know why I like it. I just do. It's a great concept, and I'll keep buying his books. But I have to admit, I'm probably reading like one book every 6 months for pleasure.
Yeah.
The other books I'm reading are like this one right on my desk, Pax Romana, for you know, it's
a little light reading.
Yeah, and this is a fantastic book, and it gives you that, because when you're writing what I'm writing, you want it to be as accurate as possible. And you want to make sure that you get it right. You know, what was the actual role of a tribune? What was the actual role of a legate? You know, centurion, optio, things like that, because people will catch you in it, and they will.
What's the writer that wrote? He wrote Texas, and I don't know why I'm.
Are you talking about? I know who you're talking about.
He's a big-time historical fiction writer.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yes, I've got it up here on my shelf.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I can't think of his name right now, but I've got 6 or 7 of his books up on my shelf.
And when you hear it, even non-readers will know, because there's been like 15 movies made out of them. But he said, I thought one time I read.
He wrote Centennial too, didn't he?
Right. He reads 100 books, like 100 books on the topic before, and he reads about the era he's going to write in for like 3 years before he even starts to do anything. Wow. You know, puts a lot of work into it, and
it is. My wife hates it when I start working on a new topic, like for my podcast and stuff. But
you're talking about James Michener?
James Michener, yes. Because he's a great author.
Good job, Josh. You get a gold star.
Yeah. Google for the win.
I use Amazon. It was Amazon, not Google.
Oh, Amazon. Okay. My favorite company.
Yes.
They are. But you know, like my wife hates it, because when I get into a topic, you'll get all these books that'll just start coming from Amazon or from old bookshops, or, you know, I'll go out and I'll go out to the bookstore. Like we used to have this great old bookstore here that was like a used bookstore. They had history books that were literally you couldn't get your hands on anymore, and those are the best. Some you need to put in plastic bags and only open them with, you know, like a mask on. But they've got really great information in there, and you take what you can use. And you're constantly absorbing, and the sad thing is that you forget a lot of what you're reading. That's why you take notes.
Sure.
Right.
But there's just so much information that, and so many things that as you're learning, you don't realize how little you know that you have to learn. And if you can include some of that in your book, you know, like one of my beta readers at the end of this book went ahead and said, you know, after I got done reading Stiger, Tales of the Seventh, I was really glad that I enlisted in the Air Force. because you know, I was like, well, I wanted to give my readers a sense for what it was like to be a legionary, having to march god-awful long way to a battle, and then fight in that battle, you know, and how exhausting that is, and how just physically demanding that is, to the point when it's over, you literally have people that fall asleep where they stopped fighting.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, and that happened. And that stuff, when you can include that kind of stuff and that realism, I think for the reader, it brings the story alive. And, you know, going back to the battles and stuff like that, the serial killers kind of stuff, a lot of that's imagined, but you look at the Roman tactics, you look at how they fought, how their enemies fought, and you can come up with what you think is a realistic idea of how those battles went down. And then you tell it. And if you skimp on some of the gorier details, I think you do a disservice to your readers. Now, there is a point where good taste kicks in, and you can't keep showing that.
Right.
But you know, when you talk about, a lot of people don't realize that when you have a shield and you're holding onto that shield with your arm, and somebody hits that shield with a sword or a pike or a lance or whatever, that's going to hurt.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And you feel that communicated to you, and you just keep holding it and stand there. Or if you've ever hit a baseball in cold weather with a wooden bat, that can hurt your hands. Well, how does it feel to hold a sword and jab at somebody? Because the Roman legionaries were trained to jab, and hit a shield, hit armor in cold weather, or just have them punch back with their shield. How does that feel? It's going to make your hands tingle. It's going to make them hurt. And what kind of discipline does it take to stand there in battle and take it and give back? And that, I think, makes the story a story more compelling, more entertaining, more enjoyable for the reader. And I love telling that side of the story because
well, it appears that a lot of people have liked reading it, because in a year and a half, almost 2 years, you've sold 150,000 copies of your books.
A ton of reviews on there, I noticed also.
With any,
I'm very blessed.
Yes, I mean, with any author, 150 titles is going to be a good amount of books to push in a year. But to be doing it in your first year and a half is pretty.
It's
it's pretty exciting. I mean, you see people that come out and do this stuff and are successful at it. And for me, it's inspiring to me, knowing that you put the time and the effort in, it can happen to you. You got an audiobook deal with Podium Publishing. You say you're going into traditional publishing with a future series. Is all this kind of come around with your agent? Do you think that most indie authors, even though they're indie, should get an agent? What are your thoughts on that?
I couldn't be as successful as I am now without my agents. I would have been successful, but nowhere near where I am now. They've really given me, I would have to say, a PhD course in marketing, building my brand, making sure my books are as published as possible. Hell, I didn't even know what a copy editor was prior to publishing my first book. Now I know, and we're actually going back and we're going to re-edit book 1 to make it as smooth as possible. None of the major concepts are changing, but that's happening. They've really worked very hard with me to show me what I was doing wrong, what I was doing right, and to really expand upon that. And without them, I couldn't be where I am today. And I don't think I would be at a position of being able to sell a manuscript to a publisher without them.
So I'm curious to know how it works on the indie side, getting an agent. If you go through like a traditional route with an agent, the publisher is going to give you a certain amount of money. The agent is going to take that money, take their 10 or 15%, and give you the rest.
Yeah.
How does it work on the indie side the you're not getting a big payout? You're just getting basically the royalties, and then they cash out from there.
Well, a lot of times on the publishing side, from what I understand, I could be wrong, but how it's presented to me is that you get an advance, and that's an advance upon your commissions, that your royalties that you're going to make off of book sales. It kind of works the same way. It's just different how you get paid. Like Amazon pays you monthly. On the indie side, big publishers are going to pay you once every 6 months, once a quarter, or perhaps even once a year. With Podium Publishing, they're fantastic. We get paid quarterly, and it goes to my agent first. So it's how you do it, how the publisher operates. Everyone's different. And I'm sure that with some of the bigger authors, they carve out their own deals. But I'm just a little fish. So,
well, I wouldn't say that.
Yeah.
I'm working hard at it. And look, it's fun, and it doesn't mean that the writing will continue to be successful for me. I could completely fall on my face, and I realize that I'm just excited that people actually really like my writing, and as long as people keep reading, I'm going to keep writing.
You got it. Beta readers reading your books 8 times. I think you're doing something right.
Yeah. Well, I challenge them. Like in this last book, I was like, it's fantasy, right? My first book is very low magic. It was done that way intentionally. In
Right.
this book, Stiger, there's low magic as well. And I said, listen, there are 5 instances of magic in this book. Find them.
Yeah.
And it's a challenge. So, but
It's
what's
an
the-
interesting new subgenre, the low magic fantasy. We can talk about that maybe at another
Sure.
point,
sure,
yeah, that is interesting.
You published your 4th book Thanksgiving, right? It's
I
just
did.
just released.
Uh-huh.
And
The
that
official launch is December 1st.
Oh yeah.
The marketing, nothing
That's
kicks
right.
in until then. So
Forget everything I just said. Go buy it December 1st. What can we expect from you coming in 2017? Do you have any big projects? I know you said you had that traditional publishing deal that you can't really talk about, but what about indie projects?
I've got book 4, the actual book 4 for the Chronicles of an Imperial Legionary Officer series, the Silo series. That's coming out in the summer. I've got another project that I'm working on as well, which is part 2 to Stiger, which is entitled Ellie. That should come out in the fall. And then I may have another book. I read it really fast. So I'll probably have 2 books coming out this year on the indie side. I'm not sure when on the publishing side when that book will come out. That would really be up to them. But my guess is I'll have 2 books this summer, another one or 2 books this year, and another one in 2018 in January, February.
And all within the kind of fantasy realm. I mean, you mentioned you like science fiction, but
I've got a really cool concept for a science fiction story that I've been dying to write. Not the books I've already written, and that's another thing. If you're a writer, don't tell anyone your ideas. Save it for yourself. I can't tell you how many people email me on Facebook or message me on Facebook or email me, and it's great that they want to talk, and I'm really willing and want to engage them because they like my work, and they also want to seek your advice. And I tell them constantly, they're aspiring writers, don't tell me your ideas. And the reason I don't want to know your ideas is not because I don't think that you've got a really great idea and I don't want to hear about it. It's because I don't want to get your idea and then potentially write about it by accident, because you hear so many different things and then potentially get accused of taking somebody else's work. I try to make myself unique.
And the other thing is that an idea, when it's new, you know how much magic an idea has when you're writing the first draft, and there's all this power and energy in the idea. But as soon as you start, it's like it's got pressure, and if you start releasing the pressure, then it loses its power, and then it loses its power to motivate you to write the idea. So I think sometimes you need to keep the idea to yourself, let it grow, and until it's ready to come out and hatch into the world.
Absolutely,
I agree, and it's your idea.
Right.
And if you have an idea and you think it's cool, chances are it is cool. Yeah. And there's nothing stopping you from actually writing it. And you should. You run into people occasionally say, I've been working on a book for 10 years, but I just can't seem to finish it. Well, how often are you working on it? Realistically, I work on it every day. Honestly, once every 2 weeks. Well, if you don't work on it every day, you're never getting it done. So
I'm doing research and I'm planning.
Yeah, exactly. But there is a point where you do your research. You may not be finished with it, but then you've got to sit down and actually do it.
Yeah.
And you've got to make the time. If you don't make the time to write, my agent's email when it comes into me, it's not Andrea Hurst. It's her name is Just Right. That's what it comes in, is just right. And it's so true, because you just need to sit down and just write. And I really appreciate that. And it's as a writer, and some people are afraid of publishing their work. And that's fine. I was kind of concerned about how people would view it. And I'm still concerned. Whenever I have a new book come out, I'm like, oh my God, are they going to hate it? Are they going to like it? And I'm agonizing. My wife's like, shut up, they're going to love it. It's like, but, and I hope that continues to be, but if you don't put yourself out there, and it is a very hard thing to put yourself out there, but if you don't put yourself out there, you have no chance of success. And the other thing is,
if anybody likes it or not, if you don't give it, let somebody read it.
Exactly. And the other thing is that if you are going to self-publish, and you are going to publish it, what you need to do is make sure that the book is as polished as possible. That means you have to go out there, you have to get a true developmental editor to go ahead and give you feedback, which isn't very, it's not nice to hear all the time. And then you have to get somebody to copy edit it. And that means that they go through and they remove your restrictive clauses, your non-restrictive clauses, and put your commas in the right place and make sure you're using your right word choice. And things that you've read over 100 times, they will spot words that you will never see. Like, instead of plan, you've written the word plan. They'll catch that. And
From
you want
form.
exactly. and it's, I can't tell you how important it is, because if you go out there and publish a book and you put yourself out, you get one shot at introducing yourself to the world as a writer. And if you get bad reviews because you've got grammatical errors in there, it's going to make it so much more difficult to be successful. Right?
Sure. Right. Oh, yeah.
I mean, I get if you look through some of the reviews on book one, okay, that went through an editor. It didn't go through a copy edit. It's going through now, but you'll see that there are people in there that complain about some spelling mistakes and stuff like that. Most of that's been fixed.
Right.
Because Amazon now has a program that pops up and shows you, spelling mistakes, whatnot. But there weren't a whole lot in there. But still, you get raked over coals if one word is out of place. And I understand that. I mean, it's if you're reading a book, I've read books, where, and I'm sure you have as well, where you've read it and you find a spelling mistake, and it's like, how couldn't they catch that?
Right.
I read a book the other day. I read a book. I just threw it on my Kindle, looked interesting, and I got it on there, and it was formatted. So, and I've heard people complain about formatting. I've never done that because I understand people do a little bit different. There's different conventions, but this one, all the paragraph indents were all different.
Oh wow!
And I was like, how could that slip by anybody? I mean, do you even care? And then of course I looked up the person. Obviously, it's a pen name, and they didn't really attach their actual identity to it, so they didn't care. But which, I mean, I think pen names are great, but in this one, it looked like they just kind of vomited it out into the internet.
You definitely want to put the best product out there that you can without any half-assery going on, because people will spot that.
Is a real word.
You really do. And, I recognize it more now than I ever did before. That if I'm going to put something out with my name on it, it's got to be as polished as possible. And that means you've got to work to make that happen. And it's hard work. It's not easy. And it's the editing, the writing is easy.
Yeah.
The editing is
that's just daydreaming with pencil in your hand.
exactly.
Sometimes.
And sometimes. I mean, it's, the daydreaming, I've got like, I don't have one here, but I've got like these journals that are just filled with ideas. For a book, and then I sit down and and that's daydreaming. That's fun stuff because that's really cool. You know what I mean?
Creative process.
It's like, hey, what if the dragon does this or that? And you build up to it, or but when you actually turn it into an outline, like my last outline is like 76, 77 pages for this next book I'm about to write, and all those ideas are incorporated in that book with even some as I'm sitting there coming up with the outline. And the outline, I think, makes it so much easier to write.
Yeah.
And and then when you actually write, it's fun because you're taking that outline, you're putting it into words, and you're making your characters real. And you go back and edit, and it's shit.
Do you update your outline as you write in case things change?
I do. Every once in a while, what you'll do is you'll notice that there are inconsistencies that you hadn't spotted before. And you'll be like halfway through the book. It's like, let me go back.
We had a
shit. I killed him off.
He's not supposed to be there.
Yeah.
Apparently, we had a question come in from Twitter about the dragons being in your book and when they're going to show up.
Well, the dragons actually show up in book 3.
In book 3.
Book 3, yes. So,
very George R. R. Martin.
What was that?
It's very George R. R. Martin. There's things that takes some germination to get there.
Yes,
this is a compliment.
And they actually play a big part in the series. I planned everything out in advance, and it's so when you're reading it, some things that don't seem important end up becoming very important later on. There's a lot of foreshadowing in my books. You may not pick up on it, but it's there. And there's a whole plan for everything. And what I think part of the fun is that many of my readers get into it is figuring out what that plan is and trying to figure out where the series is going. And if I can keep them guessing, and none of my beta readers have been able to guess so far, and I'm not telling them. They have no idea what's in the next book. I think that if you can keep that mystery going and keep it engaging and entertaining, you're doing something right.
Absolutely.
I'm going to guess that eventually they have to destroy some sort of Death Star type thing at the end.
No.
Okay, maybe not a good guess, but that's okay.
But how could they find that Millennium Falcon anywhere?
Yeah.
You know, when it takes off.
Maybe not the best guess ever.
Yeah.
Well, we're coming up on the
They've
hour.
been looking for it forever, but it goes into space and they find it. Come on.
They're like, what is the Jabba the Hutt?
Big.
I don't even know what it is.
Yeah, anyway.
Deus Ex Machina there at the end.
Yeah. Mark, we're coming up on the hour. This has been a great interview.
Awesome.
Is there a place where our viewers and listeners of the podcast can come and find out more about you and more about your books?
Sure, they can go to Facebook and look up Marc Edelheit, author, or they can go to my website in maenovels.com. That's Marc Alan Edelheit, maenovels.com.
Awesome. It's been great talking with you. I learned a lot. It's always inspiring to me to hear people come and talk about their products and their writing, as then I want to start writing, and then I've got to go chase a 2-year-old upstairs for a while before I can start writing. But thanks again for coming on the show. Everybody that
Thank
watched,
you for having me.
thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe, like our YouTube channel. It'll be up on the iTunes feed here probably tonight or tomorrow, and be sure to hop over to iTunes and check us out there. So for Scott, I'm Josh Hayes. This has been live on Keystroke Medium, and we'll see you guys on the next show. Take it easy.
Thank you.